I want to start today by showing you what I was able to find on a 30-minute hike alongside the Kern River as proof that life is everywhere. You need to just know where to look. These were the ones that I was able to photograph. The landscape is dominated by gray pines. Here is one of their giant cones. Narrow-leafed willow. You can see some of their seed pods here. Live oak, Great Basin sagebrush, white alder, Mormon tea, Fremont cottonwood, and even ferns. In the trees are common ravens, lesser goldfinches, yellow-rumped warblers, and black phoebes. In the sky were turkey vultures and even one golden eagle. Under rocks, I found ants, millipedes, crickets, centipedes, and even little seedlings. On the rocks are basking side-blotch lizards and sagebrush lizards and lichens. Between the rocks are holes from ground squirrels, and by the water, I was able to find an indicator species, a stonefly, a sign of a healthy river. Beside the shells of freshwater clams and mussels, and the tracks of skunks, raccoons, and dogs, this wolf spider ran along the rocks beside the river in a small pool, a tree frog.
Come here. Come here. Oh, you got him.
On the river were mallards, great blue herons, mergansers, dippers, and trash. Here you can see 4 piles of toilet paper, and I even found a bottle of urine. And in the end, this was everything that I was able to collect along the river in about 30 minutes. And now that all goes in the trash. Before we go any further, I need to make it clear that humans depend on nature for our existence. Without plants and animals, our population would crash. Our economy, food, shelter, health, and safety is intertwined with functioning ecosystems. We call these benefits of nature ecosystem services. One of the goals of ecologists is to protect nature because of its importance to our survival, as well as its intrinsic value. Community ecology is the study of species interactions and focuses on what happens to the community when one species increases or decreases its population. To review, communities are composed of many species in the same habitat that interact. A pond community, for example, might include stickleback fish, sunfish, dragonflies, frogs, muskrats, great blue herons, and many others. The community does not include abiotic factors like rocks, soil, water, and temperature. The ecosystem does, and we will consider the impact of these factors on organisms as well as disruptions from humans in a later lecture. We have a big question to ask about communities. How strong are they? If our goal is to protect nature, how much protecting do we need to do? What happens if we cause the extinction of just one species? Will that cause a trophic cascade, potentially causing a collapse of the food web? Or are communities resilient to change? How quickly do organisms adapt? We know that organisms like beavers are really important to the stability of the community.
So Gabby, what if one animal had a huge impact on the survival of all others in an ecosystem?
Great question, Vinny. We would call that organism a keystone species. A keystone species is one that plays such a large role that without it, an ecosystem wouldn't be nearly as successful or balanced. It doesn't mean that there has to be a lot of them, but just that they have very important interactions with other plants and animals.
So, in a desert, would you call a cactus a keystone species?
No, because even though cacti are important, the ecosystem wouldn't fall apart without them. However, some hummingbirds that live in the desert are considered keystone species because they pollinate so many different species of desert plants that wouldn't be able to survive without them.
Wow, so keystone species are really important for the survival of all organisms in an ecosystem. Is there an example of a keystone species that live in wetlands?
Yeah, and it's one of your favorite animals.
Let me guess. Is it an eagle?
No.
Is it a bear?
No.
Oh man, is it a beaver?
Good guess. Beavers actually help create wetlands by building dams and lodges. Beavers are vegetarians, which means they only eat plant material. Everybody knows that beavers chop down trees, but it turns out they don't actually eat the whole thing. They use the top branches for building material, and then use the smaller twigs and branches for food by storing them in their dams and lodges. An adult beaver can cut down up to 300 trees in 1 year. Beavers build dams to control the flow of water, just like humans do. These are long, flat structures made of mud and branches packed together to make a wall. Normally, a beaver will begin by packing large branches into the bed of a stream. Then, once the structure becomes thicker, it will place mud on it, like cement, to make it stronger. Then, the beaver will continue building and fixing its home until it no longer hears the sound of running water.
Lodges, on the other hand, are large, dome-shaped structures with a huge room underneath. The room is dry and above the water level. Now, lodges have a secret underwater entrance that predators can't find. And even when water is frozen at the surface during the winter, beavers have an easy time entering and leaving their homes. Structures that beavers make have a huge and positive impact on the environment around them. By creating wetlands, they not only provide homes, but also sources of food for non-endangered and threatened animals alike. This is why they're called a keystone species.
How many species are keystone species? And which species are typically keystone species? Bottom-down factors are pressures exerted at lower trophic levels. In this example, if there is no fertilizer present in the soil, plant populations decrease, and that causes a ripple effect on the food chain. Top-down factors are pressures exerted from higher trophic levels that can cause oscillating population dynamics. In this example, if people hunt all the foxes, there will be more frogs. I'm not sure why the foxes eat so many frogs, but I guess it's possible. With so many frogs, there will be fewer snails. What a weird example. I guess there are snail-eating frogs. And with no snails, the plant populations grow out of control. At least snails typically eat leaves. In order to study and compare communities, we need to translate these qualities into numbers, much like we did in our analysis of pet behaviors. The most obvious variable is species richness, the total number of species. Another is abundance. Both of these bird communities have a richness of 4 because there are 4 species, an abundance of 10 because there is a total of 10 birds. But are they the same? A more meaningful value is a diversity index, which is a value that ranks a community in terms of both richness and relative abundance. Relative abundance is the fraction of organisms that belong to the same species. In the first community, 1 out of 10 birds are kiwis. In the second, 3 of 10 birds are kiwis. The value of each bird is used to calculate the diversity index. That weird E is a sum sign, and you must add the values for each species together. The yellow highlighted box shows how to do it for community A. As you can see, because of the more even distribution of abundant species, community B has a higher diversity index. So, what can we learn from these values? If we look at islands, we notice that bigger ones have more species. In fact, any larger area will have more species. This may seem obvious, but consider how important this is for conservation. Save the biggest areas and protect the most species, right? Here, I've put together some data for US national parks, listed in terms of area. You might expect the small parks to have the fewest species and the biggest ones to have the most. This is basically true for birds. Joshua Tree has low numbers, but it has one type of habitat, Mojave Desert. Death Valley ranges from an elevation of -282 feet to over 11,000 feet, and ranges from deserts to mountains. But the pattern falls apart when we look at mammals or amphibians. Diversity patterns are a bit more complicated than being just based on area. Other factors like resource availability, temperature, the degree of human disturbance, the age and isolation of the area, which means more time for species to evolve, and the number of habitats all play a role. I have included the number of visitors per year as an indication of disturbance. So maybe we need to worry more about conservation in the Great Smokies than the Everglades. You may not have known it, but the Great Smokies have many mountain peaks that act as islands, separated from one another and acting as engines of speciation. The elevation change means that there are a diverse array of habitats. The park also contains many different cave systems that are home to unique species, and rivers split the park up even further. So it is not surprising that amphibian diversity is high in a large wet park with many niches. Niches are roles that species play in an environment and involve where they live and what other species they interact with. The more niches in an environment, the more species that can exist. In this example, anole lizards have divided up the landscape where each is specialized in a different niche. What these lizards are eating would also be part of their niche. And since I mentioned species interactions, let's review the different types.
Antlions are insects. In their adult form, they sort of look, in my personal opinion, like a less cool version of a dragonfly. They are not a dragonfly. But in their larva stage, they look, well, not like many things I can compare it to. They have these mandibles and they make these sandpit traps. And then they wait with their mandibles just showing above the surface. When an ant or other small insect walks over their sandpit, they drag it in. They pull the ant underground, biting it and injecting it with enzymes to digest it in order to consume the ant's juices. I also have learned by watching them that they toss sand at their ant victim too if they need help subduing it before they drag them under. Thankfully, antlions are small. In fact, doodlebug is evidently another name for these things. I'm not exactly sure how you go from antlion to doodlebug, but okay. It's all relative. They're bad news for an ant, because the antlion is a predator of the ant. The ant is their prey. That's an ecological relationship right there. And that's what we're going to talk about, ecological relationships. Typically, if we were to graph the predator and prey populations in our example, when the population of ants in this confined area increase, it is likely that the antlions, which are the predators, also will increase over time because they have more food to eat. However, if the antlions increase too much, there won't be enough ants, which are the prey, to feed on. So the antlions will decrease. You can see that relationship in this predator and prey graph. In most ecosystems, predator and prey graphs go up and down frequently. It cycles. Also, just because this antlion is a predator doesn't mean that this is the only role it plays. An antlion can get eaten by a bird. Now the antlion has just become the bird's prey. Competition is also another relationship to consider. Antlions are consumers, which means they have to eat other things. They can't make their own food. They have to compete with other antlions for this food too. This food being their prey, the ants. This example shows competition for a limiting biotic factor. And they're not just competing with other antlions for this biotic factor. They may have to compete with completely different species in the area that are also predators of ants too. For example, jumping spiders like ants. You know, it's not just consumers that compete. Producers, like this plant, make their own food, but that does not mean they don't have to deal with competition. For example, this plant here is competing for this limiting abiotic factor, light. Symbiotic relationships are specific types of relationships where different species live together. Parasitism is an example of a symbiotic relationship where one organism benefits and the other is harmed. An example? Well, you know, I love dogs. Petunia is the cat person. When my family took in our rescue dog, she was 4 months old at the time. We learned from the vet that she would need to be treated for fleas and hookworms. We were able to give her medicine to treat these parasites. A good thing because these parasites can hurt the dog by feeding on their blood. A parasite is an organism that gets its nutrients from another organism and causes harm to its host. They can live inside or on their host. Mutualism is an example of a symbiotic relationship where both organisms involved benefit. You really need to look up a video about acacia ants and acacia trees because this is a fascinating example. See, some species of acacia trees form these hollow thorns which provide housing to acacia ants. Some species even provide a nectar for food for these ants. So what does this tree get in return? Protection. I'd hate to be a type of consumer that eats acacia trees because if it has acacia ants, the ants will come out of the thorns and attack the consumer. They'll even destroy plants that try to grow close to the acacia tree so the ants can eliminate the tree's competition. Nice mutual relationship between the acacia tree and the acacia ant. The last symbiotic relationship we'll mention is commensalism. This one is interesting because in this relationship, one organism benefits and the other is neither helped nor harmed. It has a neutral effect. Some species of barnacles and whales are a great example. Many barnacle species can attach themselves to moving things, like a boat or a whale. On a free whale ride, the barnacles get a lot of access to food since they are filter feeders and the whale may travel to nutrient-rich waters. In this particular example, the barnacles benefit, but neither help nor harm the whale, so this would be commensalism. But I do like to remind my students that sometimes there's more to the story with a relationship labeled as commensalism, and sometimes what we thought was a completely neutral effect may not always be in every case. So why do all these relationships matter anyway? Well, one reason is that these interactions can make significant impacts on populations of different species living together. That means if the population of a certain species is threatened by human activity, for example, it can affect more than just that one species.
Back to niches. If there was no competition, the range of use for a particular resource can be seen as a bell curve. If we took water availability as the resource, a salamander would not be found where it is dry or where there is a lake. Salamanders will drown. They have their preferred level of wetness, but can sometimes be found outside their ideal level. This range is called the fundamental niche. Competition can reduce the niche range. For example, a weak competitor might do fine in drier areas, but another species outcompetes it within that range. Thus, the realized niche is smaller than the fundamental niche. This can lead to resource partitioning, where species alter their niches to avoid competition, dividing up resources and specializing. The range of a resource that a species uses is called the niche breadth. Species with narrow niche breadths are specialists, and species that have wide niche breadths are generalists. We can map out where species that are specialists are found to get a sense of where rare species live. These species with small ranges are called endemics. This map shows endemism for amphibians in the United States. Clearly, the Southeast has the highest endemism, which is not surprising since it has the highest humidity. The lack of amphibians to the north is likely because of the Appalachian mountain range, and Florida has fewer amphibians because it is flat with fewer habitats. The diversity pattern for amphibians is similar to the map of endemism. But when we look at threatened species, those that have declining populations because of human disturbance, the San Gabriel, Sierra, Cascade, and Blue Ridge Mountains light up. We can combine data on endemism, diversity, and species declines to create a map that shows conservation priorities for amphibians. If we want to maintain their diversity, these are the regions that need protection. But mammal diversity patterns are very different. And so conservation priorities for mammals are different. But we can combine data for all species and come up with a list of our top priorities. If we can protect these 9 areas, we can protect 60% of all species in the United States. And scientists have done the same analysis for the planet, creating a list of 36 locations that cover just 2.4% of the planet, but would save 60% of the species on the planet and protect 35% of ecosystem services. The present state of the world is that we have limited funding and resources. 15% of the land and 17% of the oceans are protected, but 80% of populations are in decline because of human activities like clearing land, pollution, hunting, and introduced species. Communities do naturally shift, but if too many species are eliminated, they will eventually collapse.